You know, humans have this funny habit of predicting the end of the world every other decade. It's like we have a subscription to Apocalypse Monthly, and every issue tells us we're doomed. Whether it's from overpopulation, running out of food, killer robots, or that time we all thought Y2K would turn microwaves into death rays. But here we are. The lights are still on, your fridge is still humming, and the internet is still serving cat videos on demand. Why is that?
Hey y'all, come look at this.
Well, what if I told you there's a guy who walked into that party, listened to all this doom and gloom, and basically said, "Hold my beer, let me show you some actual data"? That guy is Matt Ridley, and he wrote a book that's essentially a 453-page middle finger to every doomsday prophet since forever. Now, before we dive into this literary rebellion against pessimism, let me set the scene. For centuries, and I mean centuries, humans have been absolutely convinced that the end times are just around the corner. We've had prophets of doom predicting that we'd run out of food, run out of energy, run out of hope, and generally run out of pretty much everything except reasons to be miserable. Think about it for a minute. Every generation has had its own version of the sky is falling. The ancient Romans, for example, thought barbarians were just going to destroy civilization as they knew it. Medieval folks? They were convinced the Black Death was the end of everything. And if you fast forward to more recent times, we've had all sorts of predictions about mass starvation, energy crises, population bombs, and resource wars that would honestly make Mad Max look like a Disney movie. But here's the kicker. And honestly, this is where our story gets really interesting. Every single time, just when things looked their absolute worst, humans pulled a rabbit out of the hat. Not through magic, not through divine intervention or anything like that, but through something so simple it's almost embarrassing. We got creative, we traded with each other, and we innovated our way out of trouble. Let's talk about the Irish potato famine for a second. The Phytophthora blight hit Ireland's potatoes like a biological wrecking ball, and about 1 million people died. Absolutely tragic, right? Now, any reasonable person looking at this would probably think, well, that's it for potatoes. Game over. But what actually happened? Humans bounced back. We developed disease-resistant varieties, diversified crops, and improved agricultural techniques. The Great Depression? Same story. It looked like the end of capitalism, but somehow we managed to not only recover, but create unprecedented prosperity. It's like humanity has this superpower where every time someone says, "This is it, we're done for," we respond with, "Hold on, let me just invent something real quick." So along comes Matt Ridley with his book, The Rational Optimist, How Prosperity Evolves, published by Harper Perennial in 2010. And this guy, this absolute madman, decides to take on literally everyone who's ever predicted the end of the world. He's looking at 200,000 years of human history and saying, you know what? The data suggests we're actually getting better at this whole civilization thing. Now I know what you're thinking. This sounds like some feel-good, rose-colored glasses nonsense, right? Wrong. Ridley comes armed with statistics, science, and enough data to make a mathematician weep with joy. He's not just saying everything's great because I said so, he's showing with actual numbers that we have lower rates of all the bad stuff, violence, disease, poverty, you name it, and higher rates of all the good stuff. Here's where Ridley gets really controversial. He argues that trade, not government, not central planning, not some brilliant leader trade, is the real driver of economic development and prosperity. In fact, he goes so far as to say that governments almost always stifle development. Now, before you start typing angry comments about how we need regulations and oversight, hear him out. Ridley's argument is that when people are free to exchange goods, services, and ideas, magic happens. Not literal magic, though sometimes it feels like it, but the kind of innovation that comes from millions of people solving problems for each other. He's basically arguing for what we call globalization, but he's doing it with historical evidence spanning millennia. Now this is where things get really spicy. Ridley challenges one of the most popular pessimistic narratives of our time, that Africa is doomed to perpetual poverty. He's looking at this continent that's been written off by so many experts and saying, actually, no, the data suggests something different. He even references some research. And this is where it gets personal for me because he mentions work by Jim Gakowski and the author of my source material, studying the effects of agrochemical use on forests in Ghana's western region. The conclusion? Going completely organic might sound environmentally friendly, but it could actually keep large portions of the population hungry and be detrimental to forests because it requires more land to produce the same amount of food. I know, that's not what you expected to hear, right? But that's Ridley's whole point. Sometimes our well-intentioned solutions create bigger problems than the ones we're trying to solve.
I see.
Thomas Malthus walks into this book like he owns the place, with his famous theory that population growth would outstrip food production, leading to inevitable famine and misery. Ridley looks at Malthus, looks at the Green Revolution, looks at current population trends, and basically gives him a statistical wedgie. Here's the beautiful irony. While everyone's been worrying about a population explosion, birth rates are actually declining in most developed countries. Meanwhile, we're producing more food than ever before, including genetically modified crops that would make Malthus's head spin. The guy predicted doom, and instead we got abundance. It's like predicting rain and getting a rainbow.
Did not see that coming.
Ridley introduces this fascinating concept called the collective mind or collective brain. Imagine, if you will, that human innovation isn't really about individual genius, though we love our stories about lone inventors, but about communities of people sharing ideas, building on each other's work, and creating solutions together. His argument is that when communities trade and interact, they innovate. When they isolate themselves, they actually lose technological advancement and slide backward into subsistence living. It's like innovation needs social interaction to survive, like a fire needs oxygen.
This world of yours seems like quite a peaceful and loving place.
Now, I have to be honest with you, and this is where I step back from being Ridley's cheerleader and put on my critical thinking hat. There are some parts of this book that made me go, hold up there, Matt. First, there's this correlation versus causation issue. Ridley points out that since 1800, commercialization has coincided with improvements in human sensibility and quality of life. But just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean one caused the other. It's like saying ice cream sales cause drownings because both increase in summer. Maybe there's a third factor, like overall technological and social progress, that's driving both commercialization and improved living conditions. Then there's his argument about wealthy people becoming more philanthropic. He uses Bill Gates and Warren Buffett as examples of how rich people become more generous. But here's my problem with this. If you rob Peter of a pound to pay Paul a penny, are you really being generous? And if your philanthropy happens to reduce your tax obligations significantly, is that really selflessness or just smart accounting? Don't get me wrong, charitable giving is great. But let's not pretend that all philanthropy is purely altruistic when there are significant tax benefits involved. This is where I really have to push back on Ridley's argument. He suggests that large companies can't really control governments, that they're actually fragile and frightened entities that don't always get their way.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
But come on, let's talk about Obama's TARP bailout. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, who got rescued with trillions of taxpayer dollars? The banks. And what did they do with those profits less than a year later? Kept them. Why is corporate tax almost always lower than individual income tax? Why do we have armies of lobbyists spending billions to get favorable laws passed? Remember when the gun control law was set to expire under George Bush, and despite police officers arguing for its extension based on clear benefits, it was allowed to lapse? Who had the influence to make that happen? I think Ridley underestimates how much corporations can influence policy, even if they don't get their way 100% of the time. Governments have to balance between the people who vote them in and the entities that fund their campaigns and provide economic stability. Here's something that really makes you think. If Ridley is right and everything's going to work out fine through innovation and trade, what happens if we all just relax and assume everything will be okay? What if the very pessimism and fear that he's arguing against are actually the driving forces behind the innovation that saves us? Think about it. If Al Gore and other noisemakers are just blowing hot air, but what if their warnings are exactly what motivate people to develop clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and better resource management? What if pessimism is actually optimism's secret weapon? It's like the story of the boy who cried wolf, but in reverse. What if the people crying wolf are exactly the reason we're prepared when the wolf actually shows up? So here it is, The Rational Optimist, How Prosperity Evolves by Matt Ridley. 453 pages of data-driven optimism that will either make you feel incredibly hopeful about humanity's future or make you worry that we're being dangerously complacent about real threats. Look, I'll be straight with you. This book is absolutely worth reading, whether you end up agreeing with Ridley or not. And here's why. In a world where doom scrolling through social media has become a national pastime, where every news cycle seems to bring fresh reasons to despair, Ridley forces you to look at the long arc of human history and see patterns you might have missed. Yes, he sometimes oversimplifies complex issues. Yes, his faith in free markets might seem naive in an era of growing inequality and climate change. And yes, his dismissal of government's role in progress might make you want to throw history books at him. But here's what he gets absolutely right. Humans are incredibly adaptive. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, famines, and countless predictions of our own demise. We've gone from hunter-gatherers to space explorers in what amounts to a cosmic blink of an eye. That's not nothing. The central themes of this book, that innovation emerges from freedom, that trade creates prosperity, that human creativity is our greatest resource, these aren't just academic arguments. They're practical insights about how we might tackle current and future challenges. Whether we're talking about climate change, poverty, disease, or resource scarcity, Ridley's core message is that solutions come from people being free to experiment, trade, and build on each other's ideas. It's a fundamentally democratic view of progress, not dependent on brilliant leaders or perfect institutions, but on ordinary people doing extraordinary things when given the chance. Matt Ridley himself is a fascinating character, a British author, journalist, and businessman who's not afraid to take unpopular positions. He's written extensively about evolution, genetics, and human behavior, always with this underlying theme that complexity and beauty emerge from simple interactions between individuals. Whether you agree with his politics or his conclusions, you have to respect someone who's willing to stand up and say, actually, I think humanity is pretty great in a world that often rewards pessimism and cynicism. So here's my challenge to you. Read this book. Not because you'll agree with everything, I certainly don't, but because it will force you to examine your assumptions about progress, poverty, innovation, and human nature. And who knows? You might just walk away from it feeling a little more hopeful about our species' ability to muddle through whatever challenges come next. In a world that often feels like it's falling apart, sometimes a dose of rational optimism is exactly what we need. Whether Ridley is ultimately right or wrong, one thing is certain. This conversation about humanity's future is too important to be dominated by either blind optimism or crushing pessimism. We need the full spectrum of perspectives, backed by data, tempered by humility, and driven by genuine care for human flourishing. That's a wrap on this review, folks. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are you Team Optimist or Team The Sky is Falling? And as always, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep that rational mind of yours sharp. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.